Disinterested action, was it? No, no, that was not the point. No.
We talked a little about that. I have some extra things here about the crime of Sylvester.
Oh, that was the last. That was the last. That was after the talk.
Surrender to divine will.
Yes, yes.
Attaining liberation in action.
Yes, liberation in action. That is to say, yes, we'll just take a little resume. It is there, that is to say, the new idea of liberation that you find in the Gita, a new idea of liberation, because liberation has been known to be a freedom from bondage, and it means identification with an infinite consciousness, losing oneself and merging into the absolute or into the infinite. You, by concentration, raise the consciousness to a point where the individual consciousness merges into the supreme or into the infinite. That was regarded as a summum bonum or the highest liberation. Here Gita for the first time puts a new idea of liberation, that it is possible to have the divine consciousness while one acts. And during action it is possible to realize the identification with the divine. It is identification with the divine will. That is to say, it is based upon his concept which is studied in Life Divine, that the whole cosmos, the universe, is a manifestation of an omnipresent reality, that a divine reality is at work in the cosmos. And it is therefore possible to come in contact with the will of the Supreme working in the cosmos. And if one identifies his will, makes his will one with the Supreme will, then it is possible for one to have the identification and complete liberation while acting, during the course of action. And that mukti it calls sadharmagati, means attaining the nature of the divine while acting. In action to attain the nature of the divine. Divine is perfect and acts with a nature which is perfect and liberated. The man who identifies his will with the divine will also rises to that higher divine nature from which he acts, and therefore he is also liberated even while he acts. And detail that it gives is very interesting, the idea of surrender to the divine, because according to it, eternal who is not only the transcendent, but he is also the all. He is the cosmic, and he is also at the heart of each individual. And the soul in man is the representative of the eternal, or the eternal in one of his own statuses, his own positions. Man is not merely an ignorant being in whom there is no divine spark. He is the foothold for the infinite and the eternal to act in the world. So in that respect, there is a complete identification or identity. And it says that the detail of the surrender is that whatever you do, yat karosi yadasnasi, yat juhosi dadasi, yat, whatever you do or whatever you say give, whatever you eat, even the movement of your eyelids, you must make a conscious surrender of it to the Supreme. So Gita tries to go to the limit of consciousness in bringing out outwardly the process of surrender and how far it can be carried out. You see, Gita insists that you can be conscious gradually by practice of the process of surrender to the divine, your own self, your own will, your own ideas, your own being and actions to the Supreme, to the degree that you can bring it down right up to the most material or physical level of life. Even what you eat and what you give and what you do, you see, do it with the idea of surrendering it to me. That is how the Gita text puts it there. I think we had finished that portion, is it not? The surrender and the absolute being the need of giving up the sense of the doer, was it not?
Yes.
I think that was done, is it not?
Yeah.
Yes, the need of, first of all, you begin with, we'll come once again for a little revision. Just now, I want to draw your attention to this great practice of psychological division, which almost all the books of Indian philosophy and yoga recommend very strongly. and particularly in the writing of Sri Aurobindo, you will find it repeated about dozens of times. In the Life Divine or in Gita or in psychology or on yoga, any book you take up, this process, which is a practical method of, arriving at the free self in oneself, the beginning of self-realization. The process recommended is that of Sankhya philosophy. And in the Sankhya, the division is that every man has got within him a dichotomy, a double aspect. An aspect in which he can watch his nature, and another aspect in which he is part of the nature. It is easily possible for a man to withdraw himself from his thought movement and look at his own thoughts as if they were somebody else's thoughts, as if they were not his. This detachment, this dichotomy, is called Purusha and Prakriti, means the subjective self and the flow of nature. You sit down for a while and you find that you are not able to concentrate, you are not able to put your mind together. Generally, what people try to do is to put force on their mind and will and say, I must stop thinking, stop thinking. Well, that can be also done, but that would be too strong an exercise and too tiring also, and not always successful. But the easily successful and almost sure method is to separate yourself from the flow of thought, not to regard the thoughts as one's own. Because they pass into one, it doesn't mean that they belong to you. Because it is like a passage. Mind is like a passage in which thoughts from the universal mind, from the atmosphere, from people, from what you have done, subconscious thinking, reading, writing, impressions past, any number of things are responsible for the current of thought passing in one's mind. But the thoughts don't belong to you because they pass through your mind. Well, this is the first great truth which Sankhya gave to mankind as a practical psychological exercise. And Gita and Sri Aurobindo and all yogis afterwards have taken it up seriously, because it's a very important step in realizing the self, the soul, the true being in oneself. The true being in oneself is not thought. The true man, the ultimate integral being whom we say, this man, well, if you go essentially trying to find out the man, it is not his thoughts, it is not his ideas, it is not his feelings, it is not his emotions, it is not his impulses, it is not his needs, it is not his body. Man is essentially the soul. Now this soul, we have to discover. Well, this one process, there are many, but this one is practicable by people under all conditions, that is one. And it is very effective. To separate oneself from the current of thought or suggestions, ideas, impressions, volitions, movements, desires, whatever passes, put yourself out and watch the current that is passing as if it was not yours. Then you are on a safe ground. Not that the thought will stop at once. No, they may not. But you are on a safe ground where no thought movement, no movement of nature is able to disturb you. You are independent. That is the beginning of the self, the finding of the self. That is the first finding of the self, where the self is not at all influenced by nature. The self is not at all under the control of nature. He can set himself apart, watch the whole process and see as if it was somebody else's thought. Well, that freedom and that ground of being not shaken, not being influenced by nature, is the first recovery of the ground of freedom of the self. And this very self Gita works up in several verses by saying that when you begin with this witness consciousness, the one who is watching, or the seer, well, from that position of witness, you can gradually come to the position of one who can give consent. The witness will then become one who can give or withdraw his consent. He may say yes to a movement, he may say no to a movement. It is not immediately effective, but it takes time. But in time it is bound to be effective, because nature is nothing else but energy of this subjective self, the Purusha. The subjective self is the beginning of one's true self. And this subjective self is ultimately the giver of sanction, the one who releases the energy from within his own self. And it's an infinite reservoir of energy available to him. The energy available to Purusha is that of cosmic Purusha, the supreme Purusha. He is not bound to this body because he works in this body. The body is only a pedestal, so to say, on which he puts his foot in order to work in the material conditions or in earth consciousness. Body is not, as it were, a limiting condition but a convenient tool. That's all. So the thing that works in the body is the true self, and the restoration of the true self comes when one begins this dichotomy, this division of consciousness into two parts, a witness self and a nature self that moves. Flow of nature is due to nature, universal nature, and the independent status which you acquire is the recovery of the self. And this self can not only become the one who gives the assent, but he can also support the nature, he can also rule the nature, he can be ultimately the master of nature. Well, he has to end by mastery. Separating himself as witness, he will end by attaining complete mastery. The first discovery that one makes is that nature is not the self. And that is what we talked yesterday, if you remember, that when ego feels that I am doing, it is not I that is doing at all. Nature is making him do. When a man says I am responsible, he doesn't know what he is talking, because the 99.99, well, he is not independent. It is nature that compels him to do what he does, think what he thinks, act what he acts. He is not independent because it is nature in him that is working. He is under the subjection of the forces of nature, thoughts, ideas, impulses, movements. He is not, he has no say in deciding. He only is like a tool. You see, who is turned round, round and round. Real freedom will begin only when you detach yourself or try to control the self, or try to understand why one is doing what one is doing, or why one is thinking what one is thinking. Then one begins the process of acquiring self-knowledge. Now here, the Purusha consciousness, a separation of the witness self and the flow of nature, well, shows that the divine is implicit in the nature. There is already in the movement of nature, the divine is present, and it has only to be sifted, so to say, out of its identification and assert its independence. Then begins the first movement of freedom and ascent. And the divine is already present even in the unconscious and ignorant operations of nature. The point that arises in human being is that involved divinity in nature for the first time makes an effort to attain its freedom and divinity. But the divine is already present, as we have been studying in Life Divine all along. Now that we have finished it, that an omnipresent reality is really the cause of the cosmos, is it not? An omnipresent reality is responsible for the world, and that is present everywhere. Well, nature is doing what it does because of the presence inside. Nature is not doing, it's not an inert mechanism that is put into motion. It is a operation of a conscious spirit which operates behind the veil or behind the facade of what appears to us as inconscience. Nature is nature because, well, the omnipresent reality is behind and fulfills inevitably or unmistakably the function which are assigned to it from a supreme wisdom, from omniscience and omnipotence. So there seems to be, as it were, a command that had gone forth on matter or on the inconscience that it shall do only certain things and not others. That's how nature seems to behave. So the presence of the Supreme is implicit in the operations of nature. In man, when the problem of his freedom arises, then he has to separate this presence that is implicit in nature and make it a conscious part of his, well, being, his psychology, or his mode of action. He has to recover his self and be an independent, well, agent for carrying into life not an egoistic will, not a will subject to desire, not only operating or carrying out certain ideas, but carrying out a will which is not his, or which is not subjection to ego, which is not subjection to, well, current ideas of, a wider ego, but embodiment of a cosmic will or a supreme will. That is the purpose. Now, Gita suggests this one method of separating the Purusha consciousness, and this practice is strongly recommended also by the Gita. Now, yesterday we did not take up metaphysical positions which are new in the Gita, in the sense that Gita is a scripture in which many new elements of Indian culture have found expression. And some of the things are present as seed form in the Veda or in the Upanishad. But in the Gita, many of these things are brought forward and stress and emphasis is given to them so that you can notice them more prominently, more clearly. As I pointed out, the Vibhuti, for instance, or the avatar. Now, avatarvad is implicit in some of the writings of Veda and Upanishad, but it's not clear there. While Gita devotes 4 chapters to Vibhuti and several times comes to give an exposition of the phenomenon of avatarhood, the incarnation of the divine in life. Now, this has not been prominently, so I just take up some of the fundamentals which Gita brings out more prominently in its exposition in the text that we have. First, inner standard of active conduct is given in a situation where values are conflicting. That is one thing which the Gita does, which no other scripture in the world perhaps has done. If a man is faced with a critical situation in which values are in conflict, what he thought to be right now happens to think it may not be right, or he is faced with 2 duties or 2 choices of equal importance, whether he should devote himself to a certain thing or continue, or whether he should do something which people consider or society considers duty, or whether he should answer a call from inside or call of his heart. You see, there are always conflicting positions in man's life which arise very often. Almost everyone has to face it in some way or other. You see, and when the values are in conflict, well, the guidance is precarious, more or less. One doesn't know how to arrive at a solution, call of the family, or duty towards the in whom this dichotomy come at one time when he's become conscious of his inner life, particularly. When he's awakening to inner life, it will become more acute. This is the law of almost inner growth, you see. It will tend to become more and more acute, and one will say, oh, but how can I do that? Oh, this is not that. But if I do this, then this will happen. If I don't do this, what to do? Well, that comes, the position comes to that. Gita is the one scripture that points out the standard of conduct or the value which you can depend upon in any situation. How to arrive at it, that is the process which Gita gives. That way it is a unique scripture. Because ordinary standards are personal desire. That's one standard which is universally acknowledged. And the second standard is that of a social good or social idea of behavior, collectivity or society telling what is good. And the third idea is that one evolves from within himself an intellectual idealism or moral idealism, ethics or rule of conduct or religious idea, religious principle. These are known standards of conduct. Gita points out that all these are imperfect. Standard of deciding things by reference to one's own desires. That is a general standard. Everybody decides whether he likes or not, whether it will be pleasant or not, whether he will be pleased. Well, that's not the way to decide what is right or what should be done. Second point is that what is the good of the collectivity or what the people think to be right and good and just and proper. Well, one obeys that. Or the third is that one has some idea of idealism, service, or perfection, or freedom, or intellectual conviction, or principle, or he arrives at some maxim of life or ethical values of right and justice and truth and democracy, or all kinds of ideas. But individual evokes that from his conscience or from his intellect and makes it current. Gita points out that all these are steps on the way to come to the highest standard of conduct, the submission of one's own will to the supreme will. That is the highest standard of conduct which Gita points out. That if you know, you can prepare yourself gradually even through the course of action, to prepare yourself to receive the highest standard of conduct, the submission to the divine will. And how to find out the divine will, that is the process which it indicates in its karma yoga. Yes. The last standard which it gives in the 18th chapter, and I think it is 66th verse, you see, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja, aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma sucha. You see, it says that abandoning all rules of conduct, take refuge in me alone. That is the translation, you see. I will relieve thee or free thee from all evil and sin. Yes, that is the text that it gives, you see. That is one. Several times this idea is repeated in different words. But this is because it is the last and closing chapter, 18th. Well, it is regarded as the almost the message of the Gita and so on. It speaks also for the first time in Indian philosophy about three statuses of the Purusha, the subjective self, and two prakritis, two natures. Now, this Purusha we have already studied a little just now. Purusha is the subjective self that can stand apart and watch nature's movement. That is Purusha. Purusha means subjective self. The self that can separate from the movement and stand watching, not participating in the movement of nature. That is this Purusha. And it speaks of the three subjective selves, or three statuses rather. More correctly, it would be the triple status of the Purusha. The Purusha is the one and the same. This watching self or the subjective self is one. But it seems to be triple in the sense that it seems to take up three positions. When man comes on the scene of universe, well, this Purusha seems to become triple. Triple means takes up three positions. One in the individual, one in collectivity, one above the individual and collectivity, both the transcendent. The Purusha, according to the Gita, is the Kshara, one who changes, mutable. Akshara, the unchanging or immutable. Uttama, the highest. Purushottama, the highest Purusha, the supreme divine consciousness or divine personality. Well, that is how the Gita puts the division of the three. The triple aspect of the Purusha is spoken of by the Gita as the mutable, the immutable, the transcendent, supreme. Mutable is a changing personality that you find in nature. That is the ego person and the truth behind the ego person. A individual status of the Purusha. A status in the individuality of which the outer aspect is mutability, complete change, all the time changing, and not remaining steady in its own status. The other is Akshara, means that which is impersonal, detached, not participating, static, a passive support of the active movement of nature. The passivity is not necessarily anti-activity, but it is a support of the active movement. But one can get from activity into the static or passive condition and realize the impersonality of the movement of nature, the universality of the movement of nature. From the person, the difficulty is to get out of the limit of the formula of personality. The Akshara, the impersonal or the immutable, offers the ground or the experience in which the static state and the passive condition of consciousness releases the individual into an impersonality. The individual, when he withdraws into the Akshara, into the immutable, he is freed from the limitation of his personality, ego, nature, mind, life, body. He becomes free from that and feels himself and knows himself as not only the impersonal but universal. You see, he is able to widen his consciousness by in that passivity and static condition to an impersonality and universality. That and also frees him from the compulsion to action. See, in the ignorant Kshara nature, the one individual taking part in nature is compelled to or feels a compulsion to action. Well, in the Akshara, there is no compulsion to action. So that the compulsion of action also is removed and impersonality is attained and a widening into universal consciousness takes place which frees the individual from the limit of his ego. That is a second advantage. And the Uttama is one who is supporting the Akshara and supporting the Kshara, supporting the mutable and supporting the immutable. In fact, the mutable and the immutable are the two positions of the Purushottama, the Supreme Purusha. The Supreme Divine is taking up the position of the individual in the nature of man, position of the impersonal or universal in the working of all natures, inconscient, conscious, human, vital, mental and physical, all natures, you see. And one can add here that not merely this, but the fourth aspect also it refers to, and that fourth aspect is the aspect of the, if you take the Supreme Purushottama consciousness, the highest consciousness, then you see, you can look upon it like this. The Akshara is the immutable and it is immutable. The three make up one like that. It is a triple status, you see. It's not one divided into two or three, making three different positions. It is as it were, one having a triple position like that, you see. So all the three are the position of this, but this is the one that manifests here and one that manifests in this. To this you must add here cosmic consciousness, cosmic being rather. Cosmic being, Gita calls it Vishwarupa. Vishwarupa means the form of the universe, divine universal, cosmic being. This is the dynamic aspect. Dynamic aspect of the cosmic being. So this is the impersonal aspect or inactive aspect, static aspect, this is the dynamic aspect. So you can make another scheme if you like. Supreme, then you can say cosmic, individual. And in the cosmic you can say static and dynamic. In the cosmic you can make the distinction of static and the dynamic status of the cosmic consciousness. So there you got some conception of the scheme of the Purusha and Purusha in the Gita. The Supreme taking up, when it becomes an omnipresent reality, it stands at three places simultaneously: individual, universal, transcendent. It is the one identity that you are noting. You are not marking three different personalities or three statuses or nothing of the kind. It is one and the same, absolutely identical. But to the mind and to the human being, it presents itself as if it had three positions, three places. It was triple, as it were. A supreme status, a universal status, an individual status. In this universal status, there is a status, a inactive aspect, passivity, wideness of universality, and a dynamic, an active movement which participates in the movement of the world. The Vishwarupa is mentioned in the 11th chapter. The 11th chapter speaks of the Vishwarupa, the cosmic being. And when Arjuna is very much surprised, it is the Vishwarupa that tells him that I have already killed your opponents. You see, it is the Vishwarupa that tells Arjuna that I am time the destroyer. The cosmic aspect of the divine working and managing and taking part in human affair. So this triple aspect is not so prominently brought forward by Upanishad or the Veda before. You see, it is Gita for the first time made this clear distinction between the mutable individual, the immutable cosmic, the dynamic cosmic, and the supreme transcendent, of which all these are manifestation of these. All these are terms of expression, so to say, are its own parts. And it also speaks of two prakritis. Gita speaks for the first time of two natures. Before that, two Purushas were spoken of by the Upanishads, but not two natures, two prakritis. Gita speaks for the first time of two natures, human and divine. Nature human, nature divine. And Gita brings it out prominently into forefront that what one has to do is to reject the movement of the lower nature, ignorant nature, and affirm in him the operation of the higher nature, the divine nature. to embody in oneself the working of the higher nature. That would be real liberation, because it would be active liberation and not a liberation dependent upon or conditioned by withdrawal from activity. You see, up till now, the withdrawal from activity was regarded as an indispensable condition for liberation. Whereas Gita says that if the individual rejects the lower nature and identifies or makes it possible for the higher nature to act in him, then even while acting, he is in liberation, because he is acting according to the higher nature, according to what is called the divine nature. Well, this distinction of the two natures, the lower ignorant and higher divine, well, is one of the contributions of the Gita, and I think it is a very practical. It has a very practical bearing. It's not merely a metaphysical distinction, but which has a very strong bearing to practice of yoga, because it is on that the liberation idea of the Gita also depends. The idea of liberation of the Gita depends upon this distinction of the two natures and possibility of bringing down or bringing into the human being the working of the divine nature. Gita positively says that it is possible for the human being to activate in him or to substitute the divine nature in place of his human nature, which is ignorant. And therefore, while acting even, he can be in complete liberation and complete identification or identity with the divine. Well, that is one new idea which Gita puts into its synthesis. Yes. It is this Vishwarupa of whom I spoke. It is the 11th chapter in which it is described, and it is of that I refer to in our study of the collective consciousness, where I quoted the, I think, 90th or 90th, I think, 90th hymn of the Rig Veda, 10th mandal of the Rig Veda. I give you the quotation of 1,000-headed being and 1,000 eyes and 1,000 armed. Well, it is the same as you find here in the 11th chapter, you see. The same that you find here. The collectivity symbolically represented as one with 1,000 heads. Here the Kala, that 11th chapter, the Vishwarupa, the universal divinity that comes, well, the poet describes it as it had thousands of heads and thousands of hands, and it was, leaking up the whole world with the fire of destruction and so on. Well, the description is given in the 11th chapter. That is the same description in essence as the description which you had of the collective Purusha in the Rig Veda, 90th Sukta, the 10th Mandal, you see. It is there that it says, Mayaiva nihita purvameva nimitta matram bhava sabya sachin. This is one of the famous verses of the Gita, that these your opponents have been already killed by me. You have only to become nimitta, means, an instrument for occasion, occasional instrument. You have only to become the occasion for it. I have already killed these your opponents, you see. The Vishwarupa says to Arjuna on the battlefield in the 11th chapter of the Gita. What it says is that the time spirit has already done something, and what is now to be done is to precipitate it on the plane of matter. The things has been decided already by the time spirit. Well, this Vishwarupa is one that is dynamically, participating in the movement of the cosmos, in the movement of life, even in a movement like the battlefield, you see. Now, then the Gita points out also that the form of outer action is not important, but the origin of action is the important, element in deciding the value of an action. Because the man is doing a religious work, it is not religious. Sometimes it may be full of egoism and full of desire, and therefore a man ostensibly occupied with religious activity might be really not at all religious. Whereas a man who is doing what people would call a work which is not religious, well, his work may be full of religious spirit. It is just the same, because what we see of the work is not its real value. From where does the work proceed? From where does he act? If he acts from egoism, from desire, from likes, from dislike, from attachment, then there is one value to the action. If the same action is done without attachment, only with an idea of offering to the divine, then the same action has a different value. It is not the same value. And this is the deceptive appearance of nature, which very often deceives the human beings in thinking that unless you take up a work which is of public nature, service in the ordinary sense of the term, or unless you do philanthropy, you are not doing good work. It's all mixed up. You see, it's all a mixture of mind and a mixture of likes and a mixture of atmosphere. Really speaking, there is no work that cannot be used as a means for practice of karma yoga. All action can be immediately taken up as a means for rising to the ladder of karma yoga. One has to decide, that's all. To do action with the right attitude. Well, and the right attitude, if one begins, then any action that is at hand, means which is given to him under the present condition, well, can become a means for rising in the scale of yoga of karma advocated by the Gita. The value of action is not in its outer form, but in its origin. That is, so from where does it originate? And it also makes the distinction, as I told you in the first day perhaps, between renunciation, tyag and sannyas. You see, renunciation and real detachment of inner being. You see, it makes the very great distinction between renunciation and real detachment. Real detachment is want of interest in things of ordinary desire, you see. The taking out of interest, you see, the losing of interest in things, of impulse, desire or passion or lower life. That is real renunciation, not outward giving up. What Gita is pointing out is that when the taste in the thing is lost, given up, then there is real renunciation. Not outward giving up of the movement of action or taking up outer sign of renunciation like a robe or ochre color cloth or taking up the good in the hand and going about, you see. Well, that is only external renunciation which have nothing to do with the inner being at all. You see, the most important part of renunciation is first to notice that one has attachment, one. And secondly, to control the action dictated by that attachment or liking or impulse. And third step would be to know and realize that there is no interest in the thing in which one is interested or one is attached, that there is nothing to be enjoyed. To realize it is not at one bound that one does this thing, you see, it takes time, and therefore the steps that can be gradually practiced is first is the noticing of the movement of one's own inner being and controlling the movement. After notice, you control, because if you allow the impulse or idea or thing to take place, then the subjection to nature will be more and more confirmed. The real detachment comes when not only one controls, knows that this is the thing to which I am attached, and therefore he keeps a control over it. And while he is controlling, he is trying to see, get the knowledge of what it represents and what it is. And when he gets the understanding of, well, what attracts him, what to him appears to be something irresistible, he finds that it is something that wasn't worth his attention. It wasn't worth his attention, you see. Well, then that is real renunciation. After that, that object will have no attraction for him, you see. And this is a practice. There are several practices by which this is done. One practice is that of prakamya, as they call it in Sanskrit. Prakamya is a method of putting the intellect in contact with sensation immediately. Method is not to allow mind to intervene between sensation and reaction of the sensation. When a sensation is taken to the brain, generally mind intervenes with decision, with judgment, with a dynamic subjective response. An objective, vibration goes to the brain through sensation. You see an object. What happens is that the impression of the object creates a sensation, is it not? In the eyes. And the ocular optical nerve takes it to the brain. then there is a dynamic response of reception, so that there is acceptance of sensation and there is a well, response which is not without judgment. Response comes with a judgment, you see, always. Response doesn't come mechanically. Response is accompanied by a subjective element. No human being will have a mechanical response. It's not an electrical machine that it simply moves like that. No. When an impulse goes or a sensation goes, the return or the reaction to the sensation comes with a subjective judgment. I like it, I don't like it, this is good, this is bad, this should happen, this must not happen. Every sensation is always, judged. I mean, there is a dynamic judgment connected with every response that one gives. Now, one method is not to allow the judgment to intervene, but directly put the sensation in contact with the intellect, with the mind, with the intelligence. If one directly connects the sensation with the intelligence, then the intellect is able to make another judgment quite different from that of the mind, which is allowed to intervene, because mind acts on the basis of sensation of pleasure and dislike and like and preference and old impression and custom and habit, and many things are there which has formed mind into a sort of a automatic response in which you know that certain thing will be taken only at a certain value. If mind is ruled out and intellect or the intelligence or buddhi, as we call it, is made to judge, then the judgment will be quite different. To take the case of smoking or take sweets, eating sweet. Now, because I give this instance because it's easy to illustrate, not that it doesn't happen like that, but still for illustration it is quite good. When a man is attracted by this taste of sweet, well, what happens is that the sensation on the tongue makes him feel the desirability of continuing the sensation, isn't it? So if he transfers the sensation of taste immediately to intellect, what the intellect would say or see or judge is that some object has come in contact with the tongue and a certain vibration is only taking place. There will not be this idea that this is sweet. Mind being impersonal, mind will only, it is only, intellect will only say, yes, something, some object has come in contact with the tongue and it produces certain vibration, which my mind, if I was allowed to say, would have said, it is very nice. But there is no reason why it should be nice. There's nothing nice about it. It's only a judgment. It's a vibration. And not only that, at a certain stage, the nice impression will cease to be nice. If you've taken a sufficient number of sweets or taken full, well, even the best sweet will not attract you afterwards, isn't it? So it is not as it were, it was a constant truth to be repeated any time. It only will depend upon, your hunger also, your appetite also, your state. If you are with fever, then even the best sweet will not attract you. You will not like to take any sweet. It's not a rule that constantly, you see, one particular kind of reaction or response will be given by the organism. No, it is a varying thing. But when intellect is put in charge immediately, then the judgment is very impersonal, and therefore many points of attraction are ruled out automatically. It's not a rule that constantly, you see, one particular kind of reaction or response will be given by the organism. No, it is a varying thing. But when intellect is put in charge immediately, then the judgment is very impersonal, and therefore many points of attraction are ruled out automatically. You see, because mind, intellect, when it is made to sit on judgment on this kind of sensation, well, it reduces the sensation to a very small place in one's experience, you see. It makes it a vibration, and yes, it's all right. I remember a friend of mine, he was in England for 6 years, he was studying for his barristership, he was trying for his law, and he was a guest in a private house. So the proprietor had two daughters, and they used to always said, girls generally do. See that, oh, she took one sweet more and another chocolate more, and oh, she didn't give me something, and so on. There's some always quarreling. And this our friend was there. He's now a sannyasi, very nice yogi, Advaitanand. So he was studying there. He was quite young. But they used to be friendly, so they used to come and ask him, look, she has not done that and she has taken her mind. He says, yes, but why do you quarrel for that? And saying, why? Why not? Why should she take? He says, you see how far? It's only 2 inches of your tongue that the sweetness will be. After that, there is no sweetness. So what is there to quarrel about? 2 inches of sweetness. You see, the sweetness is not all through. It's only 2 inches of tongue that you will feel it sweet. After that, what is there? There's nothing. And they said, yeah, he's a philosopher. So he used to say he's a philosopher. And he became so favorite that wherever there was any quarrel, the two used to come to him for final decision because they knew his will be the most wonderful decision. See, they never thought that it's 2 inches of the tongue that make them feel sweetness. That's the working of the intellect direct on the sensation, you see. That's the intellect working straight on the sensation apparatus. Well, that is only one part of it. We are trying to see the value of action does not depend upon its form but its origin. Now, we are discussing the distinction between tyag and sannyas. That was the point, really speaking. And the detachment comes when one perceives that the object which was the object of desire, object of like, or object of attachment had nothing in it so much as to make one feel attached. That is the then comes the real detachment, which is tyaga. That is real rasavarjam rasopyasya. Gita says that when the idea of some enjoyment in the object is withdrawn, that there is nothing to be enjoyed. That's all. Then the object remaining there has no power afterward to exercise attraction or exercise its, control over the man. You see, if the man rises to the conception of his own dignity even, he would immediately be able to control these things very easily, you see. Because to think that a thing like smoke, for instance, commands the human being or compels the human being, well, it's quite enough to make him feel. If he can see like that, you see, if one can see, that what is there in it to be attracted? And why should one be submitted to, or one should subject himself to this movement? Well, immediately the power of the movement, the power of the object is gone. It's the retention of this thread between the object and the vital being that continues the subjection, really speaking. See, detachment comes immediately one realizes that the object to which one is attracted or attached will have nothing for which one could be attached. Have nothing. It is just, you see, as I said, the experience of taste, for instance, is nothing but a sensation of object called sugar being brought in contact with the human tongue. That's all. The tasteness of it is not there at all. It is only a certain vibration. And when that vibration nature of it is perceived, well, the control becomes easy and detachment still more easy. And Gita says in the 5th chapter, for instance, that one who can, you see, one has no desire or no hatred, well, he is the real sannyasi. One who can give up all his action to the divine, well, he is a sannyasi because after doing his action, he is detached and no action is binding on him. And when Arjuna asked him pointedly that you are advocating that you must give up your actions and you are also advocating the yoga of karma. So whether the sannyas of action is right or the yoga of action is right. And Gita positively gives the answer to Arjuna that karma yoga is superior to renunciation of action. Yoga of karma, yoga of action is superior as a method to the method of giving up actions, you see. Sri Krishna has to answer categorically because Arjun puts the question also categorically. And action is greater than inaction, you see. Not only that, it also says that by not beginning an action, you do not attain actionlessness. You do not become actionless by not beginning or initiating action. Yes, you see, na karmanam anarambhat naishkarmam purusho snute. One does not enjoy actionlessness when he does not do action or initiate any action. Because inaction also is a kind of action. You see, to become inactive is an action, is it not? Yes. So you are not freed from action by saying I am not acting, but that itself amounts to an action. Because to become inactive, see, not to act itself requires a powerful action on your own self. It is like a horse. Well, if the horse moves, well, to stop him means require a greater power than the horse has got, isn't it? I mean, a greater breed and greater control. So that not doing any action might also amount to action. In fact, in one verse, Gita goes to the length of saying that if you know that while you are acting, you are not acting, and while not acting, you are acting, then you understood what is action. You see, while you know how, when you are acting, you are not acting, and while not acting, you are acting, then you understood the secret of action. That's one verse in the Gita, you see. Well, it is that when you have given up the initiation of action from within yourself, and you know that while you are doing the action, it is not you, X, Y, or Z who are doing, but the divine that is acting in you, or the higher will that is acting in you, so that while even you are doing, you are not acting. And supposing you are not at all acting, still you know that the power and the will of the Supreme is acting. Then you now got the secret of action. Necessity of action or compulsion of action is not the sign of being one who can do correct action. When you can do action in identification or identity with the Supreme, then the action ceases to be yours. And therefore you are not doing action at that time. And when you are not doing action, you are in the higher consciousness. You are identified with the divine, and you know that the divine will is constantly working, whether one knows it or not, sees it or not, it is working, and you know how it is working. So while you are not acting, you are acting, and while acting, you are not acting. And then you have come to the secret of action, or the mystery of action is revealed to you. The liberation idea I have already developed before this time, and this is a great change from the old. In the 4th chapter, 10th verse, and in the 14th chapter, 2nd verse, this nature of liberation is clarified by the Gita, that one who attains the liberation according to the Gita attains the higher nature of the divine and acts from the divine nature and not from his lower nature. That is to say, he is inward drawn even while acting outwardly. He is concentrated in self while he is looking outward. He is looking outward but is concentrated in self. He is directed to the divine in the affairs of the world. He is attending to the affairs of the world, but he is directed to the divine. Well, that is a sign of Gita's liberation. The sign of liberation that Gita gives is when the consciousness is withdrawn while it is acting outwardly. It is concentrated inwards when it is looking outwards, and directed to the divine in the affairs of the world. When it is busy with the affairs of the world, it is directed towards the divine. Well, that is a sign of the liberation attained by the sadhak, you see. That is the kind of liberation that is to be attained. Because samadhi also, this is intimately connected with the idea of samadhi. The old idea, classical idea of samadhi in India was that you must become physically unconscious, inattentive to the surrounding and circumstances. You must lose the consciousness of body and surroundings. That was the compulsory condition of samadhi. In samadhi, you must become physically unconscious, unconscious of the surrounding and conscious of your bodily consciousness. Well, that was regarded as a necessary part of experience of samadhi. While Gita shows that samadhi is not that, but this withdrawal of the being in such a way that you will be concentrated while you are attending to outside work. You are not only liberated, you are in samadhi because you are in identity with the divine at that time. And it comes by expulsion of desire, not by withdrawal of physical consciousness. Samadhi is not to become unconscious of body. Samadhi can be attained by complete expulsion of desire and rejection of ego. Then the state of consciousness in which you go, well, that is identity. And in that identity, you are really in samadhi. You are really, your consciousness is placed in the Supreme. Samadhi word comes from two words. Sam adi. Now, to place. So to place the consciousness on something or in something. So samadhi is when your consciousness is placed in the divine, well, then you are in samadhi. It's not when you are physically unconscious necessarily. Expulsion of desire and inner freedom from ego and experience of felicity of the self or soul, well, that is a sign of samadhi and not the compulsion of physical unconsciousness or unconsciousness of the surrounding. And the description of samadhi can be easily seen in the second chapter after the 52nd verse. There, Sthita Prajna, this is famous passage because many people repeat that passage every day in India and outside perhaps. There it is given how the man who has attained the spiritual poise, well, practically of one who is in samadhi, is given. And there all the signs that are given is that his intellect and understanding is free from desire and attachment, he is poised in equanimity, he has poised the spiritual poise, freed from pleasure and pain, is completely self-controlled, or he is one who can detach himself from his nature and be the witness. He is the one who controls his nature and still one who acts constantly, one who does not reject action, outer action. Well, the firm foundation of this understanding poise of spirituality is the realization of one supreme reality in all. He realizes the oneness of soul, oneness of the divine in all, not only in himself. It is that which gives him this poise, which you describe. The poise is result of his identity with the all-pervading divinity. The all-pervading divine is his constant ground of experience, and therefore his understanding is poised. Pleasure and pain do not affect him. He is full of self-control, capable of equanimity under all conditions, and a complete Purusha detachment, watching all the operations and movements of nature. That comes out of the identity with the Brahmic consciousness, the infinite consciousness. And the Vibhuti and Avatar we have seen, the description of the all-pervading nature of the divine is brought more prominently to our attention by the description of the powers of the divine that are manifested. And that is in very great contrast with all the literature in which renunciation and running down the world as an illusion is a constant note. This is a great change in the Gita. You will find Yoga Vasishtha or any other old book of Vedanta, if you take up 300 years, 200 years, about even up to 400 years back, you will find always the description that the world is ignorant and man is subjected to his senses and his mind is deceiving him and his intellect is the cheat and all. The world is, you see, is a kind of a nightmare or an illusion or something that was false and all the time deceiving him. It is Gita with contrast, 4 chapters. It shows that when Arjuna says that you say that you are all pervading and I am everywhere, how am I to know where you are? So he says, all right, I'll give you a list. And 4 chapters he gives the list. Now that is a commentary on the Isha Upanishad, as I told you like yesterday or day before. The Isha Upanishad begins with that verse, Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Whatever movement you see or feel in the cosmic movement, all that is fit for habitation by the Lord. Now these chapters of the Gita, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th, are a commentary on this omnipresence of the divine. All this is habitation by the Lord. Well, here Krishna himself speaks where to see him. He says, all right, I will show you in what form you can see me. And then he describes. Among the trees, I am banyan tree and pipal tree, and I am river, Ganges among the rivers, and Himalaya among mountains, and so on. He gives the description in which one can easily feel that any excellence, any beauty, any supreme expression of power or harmony or beauty or eminence of any quality somewhere is a sign of the divine presence. See, that is the part which is most attractive, the part which is most brilliant. Well, is the part that the divine has given him. It's the divine's part in him. It's not his own in the egoistic sense of the term. Well, there, the Vibhuti Yoga, therefore, Gita as a scripture is quite in contrast with the other scriptures in this respect, that it makes the omnipresence of the divine a very vivid element of life and brings forward that man should live constantly in the presence of this divine, all pervading vibhuti, the aspects of the divine power. One must feel constantly the presence of the aspect of the divine power around him all the time. Well, that makes him feel the divinity of the cosmos, divinity of the universe, because universe is nothing else but the process of manifestation of infinite being, consciousness, and delight, isn't it? Omnipresent reality. It is that which, in the moment of time, is becoming the cosmos. The being has become, and the becoming is the cosmos. So, universe is nothing else but a dynamic aspect of supreme reality. Well, one must realize, at least in those things in which there are prominent powers and effective effective energy and action, to feel that there is divine. And that is one of the greatest things which Gita gives to man. Because to see the world, and he puts it very nicely in the Savitri, he says, I don't remember how, by what virtue and by what deserving, I became inheritor of the wideness of the sky, the earth, the ocean, and the air. I don't know how I came to deserve this inheritance. Now that man is not conscious of the inheritance, you see. That is the greatest difficulty with man. He is not conscious of his inheritance. To feel this is a necessity, because that brings widening of the view from narrowness of the being, that whatever we see only is the thing, but behind it is something else that is operating. And whatever is great and glorious is a manifestation of the divine in life. There is a hint of transformation in the Gita, also transformation of nature, but it's not worked out. It is as a hint present there that human nature is capable of being transformed from human nature to the divine nature. It can gradually substitute the higher nature in place of the lower nature. How does it contain? If you say you have to little concentrate on the 3 things of which the Gita speaks. Gita speaks at one point of the Sreshta, the leader, the Mahatma, the great soul. It speaks of the sadhu. You see, sadhu means the saint. It speaks of the great soul. It speaks of the leader. Now, if you study the nature of these beings, people, whom it calls Mahatma, Shrestha or Sadhu, saint, it shows a certain rise in the nature, human nature, ordinary. Their nature rises superior in the scale of development, superior to people who are attracted by money, wealth, or egoistic. You will see that ordinary nature is tamasic. We say it is inert, subject to, well, darkness and ignorance. Rajasic nature is attached to action, victory, and desire and ambition. Sattvic nature is balanced, subject to light and seeking all the time truth. And when one is controlling himself or is able to put the pressure of psychic nature upon his whole nature, then after some development he tends to become a saint or a leader or a Mahatma, a great soul. Now that is the first development of the nature from complete ignorance or animality to a higher status. Then when you come to Vibhuti, you come to a greater status. Vibhuti is the direct expression of the divine's quality. The sadhu, saintly, and Mahatma is the human attainment of the top of human nature, so to say. The height of human nature is attained. Perfection, human. That is Mahatma. You see, human perfection. But Vibhuti, well, is embodiment of a divine quality, a divine power. It is not a human power, it is superhuman in the sense that it overpasses the limit of humanity in its expression and manifestation in life. That is Vibhuti. And avatar is the incarnation who embodies the perfect nature, perfect divine nature in a situation of time and space. And for a particular age, the divine comes down with a perfect nature so as to satisfy the conditions of the age in which he is living with the manifestation of a divine perfection, fully divine nature. Well, that is incarnation. So, incarnation, Vibhuti, and the Mahatma or Sadhu gives you the three stages of development by which one gradually rises from the lowest human nature to the highest human, and from the highest human to the divine quality, and perception of the avatar as the perfect manifestation of divine nature. Well, I think there is only one point, and that we can take up next time. That's all. Fine. I think there will be some quotations from the essays on the Gita if the necessity is there, perhaps. We will have some quotations from the essays on the Gita from Sri Aurobindo's writing so that you can see some aspect of the original text, essays on the Gita, from some quotations. Karma Yoga tomorrow.
Tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
And resume of the aspect of Karma Yoga. One sign of Karma Yogi. Sign of perfection of the Karma Yogi. Some just a little, because it's practical, concerned with the practice. Our collective life, you see. Systematic study like that, because it's too long to finish in a short session like that. So when you get some aspects of it, then when you go to the text, perhaps it becomes easy to follow what he writes in the essays.
How do you reconcile renunciation, the loss of all desire, not all desire, but even desire, with delight delight in nature and delight in the world that God created? Delight.
Yes, yes. Now, you see, the delight that one gets through his impulses and desires is a deformation of the original delight. We have already discussed this point in Life Divine, but now in the context also it comes like that. That Gita says actually in words, Rasavarjam rasopyasya param drashta nivartate. When he says that the object has no essence of delight, well, his attraction from it is withdrawn because he knows what is the true delight. So that the feeling of, the experience of delight or pleasure, it's not really delight, it's pleasure and joy. It's really pleasure. Well, the experience of pleasure is a deformation of the original delight. Because there is a compulsion and it's not self-existent. The nature of delight is self-existence. It doesn't depend on anything outside. When pleasure has to depend on anything outside, well, it means subjection. And then the delight or pleasure that you get is deformation of the original delight. It's difficult to convey. For instance, supposing you have if you have an ocean, imagine an ocean, and the jet into which the ocean is compelled to come is very little and narrow. Then one who has the sight of the ocean will know that this coming of the jet really is coming down from the height of the ocean, really. If the ocean was exerting pressure, the whole ocean, and only a very minor jet, very small capillary of tube was bringing it out. Well, one who has known or felt there is an ocean, full ocean, well, he will be surprised that this jet is claiming to give me some experience of the delight. No? He will be simply staggered that how can this convey the idea of that delight? It is ridiculous. He will simply, once he knows that, oh, this is not coming from below at all, this is really coming from above, first of all. But he has not seen the ocean and not felt or perceived something of the ocean. So he will all the time think that delight is springing from the ground. Delight is not springing from the ground at all. Delight is flowing from above. This is a truth which has to be seen, and then only one understands that the delight which one gets in the object of desire or impulse is a deformation of the original delight. The origin of delight is not below but above.
Formulate this question very well, and I'm not very sharp tonight, but when you were summing up the human perfection, and then the vibhuti, and then the
Incarnation, yes.
The human perfection goes up, the avatar comes down. Go over that again, will you? I probably didn't miss
The idea is that the idea of transformation of human nature into divine is not directly taken up by Gita because that is not germane to the subject matter. The point of discussion with Arjuna is how to make him decide to take up the responsibility of fight.
Yeah.
Gita is not developing a philosophy. That is what we have done. That 2 days we have finished Gita. In that Gita is not a scripture which is like a revealed knowledge or philosophical book or something that it is a book that addresses the life situation on the battlefield. So the Gita subject matter is how to convince this Arjun the fighter and make him see that a divine intervention and a divine will is possible if he accepts the divine guidance. That's the subject matter. But indirectly it shows that you not only can be free while you act, but your own nature can undergo a transformation so that you rise to sattvic nature of balance, harmony, and perfect understanding. Then you go above, where you are expressing a divine quality in you. In fact, Sri Krishna says to Arjuna, Pandavanam Arjunoham, I am Arjuna among Pandavas, so that vibhuti is not a rare phenomena, but is actually present. Himalaya is talked of as one of the manifestations of the divine. So that he points out that vibhuti, the special power, a particular aspect, and something brilliant and glorious, from the divine, manifests in life. Well, that is the second rung of the development of human nature towards the divine. One attains the vibhuti, and the avatar comes down to show that even a perfect embodiment of the divine nature is possible. Well, the human being has then to wait and give up all his action to the divine as sacrifice, then the substitution of in the human nature, individual nature takes place, and the divine nature, replaces the human ignorant nature, so that one can act divinely in life. Point is, how one can act divinely in life given human nature. Sri Aurobindo also knows, and Gita admits, that given human nature as it is, one cannot act divinely, because his human nature will distort the divine initiation, the divine will, and the divine guidance. It will make it take a certain course or a certain form which the original impulse might not have taken. So that what is needed is completely handing over one's being and one's nature to the divine. Then the divine is able to, first of all, occupy the center of action, and also change the machinery by which one acts, by substituting his own divine nature in place of the human nature. Yeah, it is by the process of self-giving that the double transformation is effected in man. And then it becomes possible for man to act divinely. Because the world or universe or life is expression of a divine reality. It is not a makeup of ignorant powers or anti-divine forces, but a divine consciousness, omnipresent reality is the truth, is the reality of the cosmos, of the world, and of life.
Not difficult to believe here, but if you get stuck on Fifth Avenue in New York and you're put down on Market Street in San Francisco, where all the merchants have their tinny wares out and the lights are on and everybody's grabbing for money, it's rather hard to believe this. I mean, it's rather hard to.
No, you can be, you see, you can be protected. You don't bother about what is around. What is around is another aspect of the divine manifesting. After all, the divine is not one aspect, divine is, million aspects. And the aspect that you see has some justification in the divine. That's why it is there.
Well, I get great pleasure out of watching people and looking at all the bright colors in the movement and the surge in the city for a while, and I get quite a bit of, I feel that's all full of light. And I also like to buy a little bit once in a while.
It's your money.
Wow.
You see, the atmosphere there is not necessarily conducive to your inner attitude. That's all right. But if you take up your attitude, then you can profit by the atmosphere. The atmosphere need not come and disturb your poise. Your poise is inner, and your poise is directed towards your inner being. Well, that need not be affected by the places you are moving in. In fact, you might be moving here or you might be moving there. This probably the same thing. Why?
A result of evolution, or not necessarily an avatar isn't anything that evolves.
No, avatar comes to hasten the process of evolution. You can say that. Avatar comes to help evolution of man towards the divine. He doesn't come as a miracle.
He hasn't passed through evolution.
No, he has not to pass. So he comes to help mankind in the process of evolution by taking the limitations of evolution on himself and showing how to overpass. After admitting the limitations, he takes up a body and then shows that a universal love can be manifested in that body even when you are put on the cross. You see? Now that degree of love is divine love. It cannot be human. Because for a human being, it is not easy to express actively that love. Now that is how it happens, you see. It comes at a certain time of human evolution to take up first the limitations and show how they are overpassed. How to reach the divine given the limitations. That is the work which Buddha does or Christ does or Krishna does or any incarnation does, you see, in its time. Person, really speaking, you see. It's a divine entity, yes.
What's the responsibility that a human being has? I mean, is everything that we do determined, or is there some, as Mother says, is there an adventure involved? Well, I mean, I mean, for instance, if you seek the divine, does he do, is there any element of chance or predetermination? You understand what I mean?
There is no predetermination in the planes below mind.
Well, what does Sri Aurobindo mean then when he says that the soul on the verge of manifestation knows everything except what's below in the manifestation, and that his coming into it, or this being coming into it, means an adventure?
It's not a, it's a way of saying, you see, it is some symbolic way of putting see, once he says in Savitri something like this, that when the soul is standing on the sill of birth, then he is taking a leap into matter. But there's a way of saying that he has assumed the whole course of evolution by taking up matter upon himself.
From the plant of the metal on up?
Yes, you see, so when he has decided, he is not ignorant. But when he comes into the material sheath, so to say, for him then it's an adventure because he has forgotten already. And the soul is on the sill of birth, just when he is conscious of his divinity, but once he has crossed the threshold, the whole of the divine origin is forgotten so completely that it is an adventure now. Now he has to find what is this, where I am and how, and then get back to his original status.
So in a sense, it's actually the divine seeking himself.
Yeah, exactly. That is more than half a dozen times we came across in Life Divine. That Satchidananda finding surprise that he is refusing to have the delight which is at work. The Satchidananda himself is refusing his own delight. That is man.
Oh, I
It's all a game of hide and seek, isn't it?
Yes, that's the popular way of putting it. Yes. He offers a sensation to his own self to attract the delight.
You are recording that. Appreciated the explanation of the three Purushas. My first introduction to Aurobindo was the essays on the Gita.
Yes, it is a very fine book.
We spent 18 months on, and when I came to the three Purushas, I didn't even know what one Purusha was. Oh, I thought I would never get it through my head, and I never did really get it through my head. So I appreciate getting in on this tonight.
He says Nishta also began with the essays on the Gita, no? Miss Wilson.
But that,
Nishta also, I think, she was very much attracted by the essays on the Gita.
yes, oh yes, I should say.
President Wilson's daughter who came to India, she was first attracted by that book.
Well, I think one great value I got out of it was spending that long a time on, I feel that I know that one work more than I do anything else because I spent more time on it. I have not done that on the others yet, which I want to.
Like the line you said.
No, Gita. You
Oh,
see,
Gita.
I had a class in it. I mean, so that I did for 18 months.
Yeah.
And I want to spend, probably, I don't know, a lifetime, maybe on the life of life. I haven't had a chance to get into it. Every week and stay with one book. At least I got a lot out of it.
Yeah, that's what I did too. 58 years.
Yeah.
In the case that after you're taken up, if you realize yourself or come in contact and have divine guidance, still it's sort of an adventure. Is that true? Is it true that it is still?
No,
It's not an adventure then.
no, it's not an adventure. Then it's a course of a journey which you know, and in which you can say perhaps it is this, perhaps it is that, but it is nothing as if you are ignorant. No, you are not ignorant. You are not ignorant.
But you only know what God wants you to know, right?
Yes, you know what is intended.
And that's there's joy in that.
Well, joy in the sense that your responsibility is not there.
You don't have the responsibility.
Yes, you don't have, and yet you have some responsibility in a sense. You see, it is a delegated responsibility. If somebody gave you some work to do, Well, you are responsible for it in a way.
That's what I want to find out.
Well, and yet you know that it's not, the whole thing is not yours. It's as if you collect somebody's money.
Yeah.
No, it's not your money. But as it is somebody's, you have to be careful about it and say that, well, it should not be meddled into or done something. It must be as it is. Well, that is your part of the responsibility in that sense. But otherwise, you are not responsible in the way in which ego is responsible, that I am doing and so on. One is not responsible that way.
I don't understand what you mean that you only know what is intended. I thought you just said that there was no predetermination.
There is a predetermination above mind, but that is
There is a
nothing.
predetermination
Yes,
above mind, but not
yes,
below mind.
yes. That is not a mental predetermination, it's a spontaneous working. It's an automatic action of a force which to the mind appears as if it is predetermination. That's all. There is no predetermination. There is a spontaneous movement. It is called. It is self-determination. We put it like that, if you want a term which will satisfy mind. A constant self-determination. You see, a constant self-determination. It's not predetermination that way that some other agent has come and decided.
Well, that was
No,
that's
it is
the
nothing.
connotation
No,
that comes up.
no.
You
That is
couldn't
the
go to-
difficulty with it. Above the mind or above the intellectual level, it is self-determination and a spontaneous self-determination, not mental decision
Yeah,
at all.
no.
It is an activity of a consciousness, which, when it comes to the mind, says, "Oh, this is determined, this is decided." But that's the mental way of looking at it. For the mind, it seems as if somebody has decided, because mind separates itself from it. When mind also identifies, mind knows that it's no predetermination, it's mind's own determination. It becomes mind's own determination. When the mind becomes mind of light and not a mind of mixture of light and darkness, then mind also knows that it is not predetermination, it's divine determination. And that's what we talked yesterday, that the only free will in the world is the divine will.
And since he's free, then it's a free will.
Oh yeah, that's it, free will. Because it is free self-determination. It is not compelled self-determination, spontaneous self-determination. Therefore, it is free will. That is a real free will without ego and without desire, without impulse, without attachment, without intellectual purpose, without limitations of mind. Yes.
I don't quite understand how, I don't think you live this life intellectually. I mean, I don't think unless you were a highly philosophical person, that you would analyze yourself so carefully as all this.
No, it doesn't require intellectual analysis, it requires devotion. Have you got devotion?
Yes.
Well, so Sherunda would say whether you the devotion, if you have devotion, you can live it far better than a philosopher. This he does because you ask him philosophical questions. So he breaks your head with his philosophy. But if you say, no, I don't want, he says, that's very good. Now, therefore, go straight to the divine. Give up all your actions to the divine, surrender them as sacrifice to the divine, and go on offering all your action to the divine and sacrifice, and without desire and without motive, and ask the divine to fulfill his purpose in your life. There is no simpler philosophy in yoga than that. And it doesn't require any philosophy or thinking. It requires only decision to act if one wants to.
Well, I think that would be a very much safer way than this.
It is safer. This also is safe if you know how to get out of it. This is quite safe. Because
What's the distinction between the servant of the divine and the slave of the divine?
Well, all the world you can say is slave of the divine.
No, but I mean, the mother says that one of the highest things is to be the slave of the divine. And is there a difference?
Well, slave has got an incapacity to give up his master, you see.
Pardon?
Slave has got an incapacity to give up his master.
Incapacity?
Yes.
Oh. Well, you got incapacity? Incapacity to give up his master.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
Yes.
Well,
That's
what,
it.
now on this, see, the mother sent out some pictures,
Hmm.
you know, and on the front it says forever love, O beautiful slave of God.
Oh, yes. But that is poetry. Yes, that is Savitri.
Yeah?
That is Savitri.
That's what I
Yes.
wonder, see,
Because our incapable of giving up the love for the divine. This incapacity, slave is used only in that term.
okay.
Yeah, I
Yes.
see that.
Incapacity to give up love for the
Yeah,
divine,
yes.
or to give up surrender to His will.
Yes, yes, that's it. A servant may decide suddenly not to serve you and quit your service.
But that doesn't have any sense of slavishness.
No, no, no. It is only this incapacity to something in him would not give up this love for the divine. Then he is a slave of it, you see. Yes, incapable of giving up. Slave in its abstract term, not in its social usage. A servant may decide to quit service,
That's what I was saying.
but a slave cannot live because he belongs to the master.
The service kind of independent of it.
Yes, yes, some sort of his own self-kept yacht, you see. And the slave belongs to the master. He is property of the master practically. He can't give up.
If we could just teach these things without words, because words are where we get separated.
Yes, yes. No, not only words. Behind the word there is something.
I know, but I mean, words are the separating factors.
That is where people all the time either, mistake similarities for same things, or same thing with dissimilarities and so on. That is what happens. Otherwise, it is very easy if man was wedded only to light to see the light.
If man is wedded only
Light.
to light.
And wants to only realize, you see, the guidance of the light, he will always get it. There is no question. But it is not that. He is busy with his own idea and he wants to put this and that and so on, 1,000 things together, and then he gets busy with ideas and thoughts and impulses and judgments and current practices and so on.